Egypt has seen some of its worst violence in modern times in the last few weeks, just 14 months after the supposedly democratic elections which the people had fought so hard to get. Since President Morsi was deposed, the armed forces have targeted the Muslim Brotherhood, and Morsi supporters, apparently blaming the Christian minority, have burned down churches and attacked Christians. So what's gone wrong? Is there a way forward? Historian, writer and political commentator Daniel Pipes is the president of the Middle East Forum and knows the region and the issues well, and he's our guest on tonight's End Zone Now. Well, Daniel, thank you very much indeed for sparing time for us today. We watched the Arab Spring, we saw the revolutions in Tahrir Square. Everybody was happy because democracy came, we thought, to Egypt, and now it's all turned to custard. What went wrong? What happened?
The trouble is that the liberals, the seculars, the moderns are not organized and have had really no major role in doing anything. And it comes down to two major powers: the Islamists, those who want to apply Islamic law, those who want to throw the Christians out of Egypt, and on the other hand, the military, which has ruled since 1952 and is neo-fascist, is socialist, is heavy-handed, is repressive. So these are the two actors in Egypt, and they're the two who are fighting it out right now.
One of the things that the world was saying after Mubarak was deposed was that now we were going to see an Egypt that was no longer controlled by the military, but events the last few weeks would seem to say that wasn't the case.
It wasn't the case. No, it was illusory to think that the military had lost control. The military had, for reasons that are not quite clear to me, allowed Mohamed Morsi to become president and tolerated him for a year and then decided enough was enough, and he's gone. And the military is obviously in charge again.
Because it's hugely powerful. The Egyptian military, that they run a huge percentage of the economy.
They do. It's estimated to be about 25%, no one knows for sure on the outside. And that has enormous implications, not just for the power of the military, but for the pauperization of Egypt. It's an old-style socialist economy, and that doesn't work. And the Egyptians are not even able to feed themselves, much less produce anything for the world economy.
Because Egypt used to be, I mean, they used to call it the breadbasket of the Middle East.
Indeed.
It was that Nile Delta was hugely fertile. So what's going wrong?
Socialism. Also, there are a whole lot more mouths to feed than there were at that time. But socialism, clearly, it is inefficient in every aspect. And there's no likelihood that the socialism, which has been discarded most places in the world, will be discarded in Egypt, because the military, which runs Egypt, benefits from making macaroni and making diapers and making all these other...
Because that's the thing that many people would be surprised that they own. Is it 9 macaroni factories?
Yeah, exactly.
And they make flat screen TVs and laptops. You know, it's not...
They don't pay taxes, they have all sorts of connections, and they make nice profits. To be a retired colonel from the Egyptian army is to live like a pasha.
So what does this mean for ordinary people? I was reading a story that now 1 in 7 of the poorest families in Egypt is now having to go without food.
And that number could be increasing. Hunger and even starvation looms. Now it's been put off by the fact that friendly states in the Persian Gulf have given or promised to give some $15 billion. Well, that will take you for a while. But it's no long-term solution, and I don't see a long-term solution. The Egyptian economy is not competitive in the world economy. The Egyptians are not able to feed themselves. They're on the dole, and there are no prospects of that changing. So in addition to the political problems that we're seeing on the streets of Cairo and other cities of Egypt these days, there's this economic disaster that potentially looms.
So the group that you were saying doesn't get organised. So these are the Christians, the non-militant Muslims. They seem to be the people who have the most to complain about but don't seem to be able to...
The people we would like to see in power are not organized, not effective. And it's not just in Egypt. One finds this throughout the Middle East. Nonetheless, I believe they are the hope for the future, and they are the ones we should provide moral and material sustenance to, because they look to us for leadership, and we look to them ultimately to get the Middle East out of the morass it's in, where the Islamists are fighting each other in Syria, and where the Islamists and the military are fighting each other in Egypt, and likewise similar problems, if not always so violent, in other countries of the region.
Let's talk a bit about the Muslim Brotherhood, because for most of us, I think they feel like they've only popped up on the radar in the last couple of years, but they've actually been knocking around for decades, haven't they?
Yes, in 1928 it was founded by a school teacher who wanted to push back against the British presence. And it was initially a quite violent organization, and indeed there was an assassination of the prime minister, which was followed by an assassination of the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in the late 1940s. And then it was repressed by Nasser in the 1950s. And then it slowly rehabilitated itself and emerged as a non-violent organization. And then it had this great success with Morsi in running the country for a year. But it has reverted back to its violent, traditional ways. And it seems to be in a full-blown clash these days with the military. A clash that I don't think it can win.
We spoke to some of our contacts in Cairo last week, and one of them told us that Christians were being particularly targeted. I think he told me 14 churches burned down in a couple of days. You couldn't walk on the streets if they knew that you were a Coptic Christian, because you would be attacked. So is that part of...
That's definitely part of it. It's a major part. Indeed, the latest number I have is 57 churches burnt to the ground, and assaults on Christians, Christian institutions, and the like. This is nothing entirely new. Under Mubarak, Christians were scapegoated. But it is more violent and more awful than it was then. There is an Islamist ideological penchant to exclude Christians from Egypt, to push them out. It is not so much genocidal as wanting to kill Christians, although that does happen too, as it is exclusionary. Get Muslims out. Make Egypt a purely Muslim country. That's what the impulse is. And it's working. Christians are leaving. Copts are leaving. Copts who, through history, had never left Egypt, are now a substantial body of people in such Western countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and elsewhere too.
Let's talk a bit about America's relationship with Egypt through all of this. Really, America's on a hiding to nothing, because either they're seen to be supporting a military regime which thinks nothing of mowing down its opposition, or else they're seen as supporting right. something that's equally unconscionable. So what's the answer for that?
There are potential guidelines. I can offer some to you, but the U.S. government under Barack Obama has been feckless, inconsistent, and unable to find out what it really wants to do, figure out what it wants to do. And therefore it's being blamed by both sides, the Islamists and the government, for being on the other side. And everybody's angry at Obama, which as a Democrat I find, as a Republican, I find rather amusing. My guidelines would be always oppose the Islamists, always. It's like saying always oppose the fascists. It's really easy to do. And always support these liberal, secular, modern types who are looking to us. And with the tyrants, with the Mubaraks and the like, work with them, but carefully, always trying to build a greater space for political participation. You don't have to accept mine, but you need some kind of guidelines, and the Obama administration doesn't have any.
I remember talking to you when President Obama made that speech in Egypt, welcoming dialogue with Islam. Right. And I remember you were skeptical, I think was probably the best description then.
Yeah, that was in June 2009. I visited with you in August 2010. At that point, it still appeared that this was a triumphant repudiation of George W. Bush's policies, and he was looking very good at the time to many. He was very popular at the time, but that has not only in the last few weeks, but over the years, turned against Obama. Indeed, his popularity rankings in the Middle East are lower than George W. Bush's, and in particular in Egypt, where his name is mud now. And he's playing golf as the churches are burning. put it more broadly, American influence in the Middle East has declined enormously in the last few years. It can certainly be revived, but I would go so far as to say that Qatar, with a total national population of 225,000, has more influence over developments in the Middle East than the United States, which is 1,400 times larger.
Wow. What does the unrest in Egypt, what does that mean for the rest of the Middle East? I mean, how are they viewing what's happening to Muslim Brotherhood supporters?
Well, there are two sides, essentially, in the Middle East. Those who want to have who prefer the status quo, and those who prefer to have revolution, Islamic revolution. And they're rooting for their prospective sides. Now, we on the outside don't really like either. I don't want a military regime in Egypt or for myself, and I doubt you do either. I certainly don't want to live on the Isthmus. If I had a choice, I'd choose the military regime, to be sure. But surely they can do better, and we can help them do better, which is what we're not doing at this time, certainly not the United States.
What does this mean for Israel?
For Israel, so far, it has meant that its opponents, its enemies, are consumed with their own affairs. But longer term, it could mean much more trouble. There is now a petition signed by hundreds of thousands that is circulating in Egypt saying no to American aid and terminate the peace treaty with Israel. We'll see how far that gets. So far, there's good coordination between the Israeli government and the Egyptian government, but that could change in a moment.
Aid is an interesting thing because America gives something like $1.6 billion a year to Egypt, but a lot of that comes back in the shape of contracts to buy American arms.
Right.
So is American aid actually that much value to the people?
Not only is it returned in military purchases, but also it's a rather small amount, large as it is, compared to the $12 billion that the various Gulf states have promised to Egypt. So that's where the Egyptians are looking to now. And one reads that Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the new military ruler of Egypt, refused to take a telephone call from Barack Obama. So that tells one something important.
What's your view of where this will go from here? It seems to have quietened down for the moment. But
not really, no. The fighting continues on the streets. I like to predict it, but I'm hard-pressed to predict this one. If you force me to predict, which sounds like you're doing, I would say I don't think it will turn into a kind of civil insurrection such as one saw 20 years ago in Algeria, where there were 150,000 dead. I don't think so, but I don't say that with a great deal of confidence.
Well, thank you very much. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Do check out our sister programme, End Zone Focus, this week, which takes us to New Caledonia to follow the work of the Wycliffe Bible translators. But from all of us, for now, ka kite anō. Bye for now.